We are back with another sci-fi action-packed film, and you're gonna love it. In this movie, we see a guy who discovers he has the ability to teleport anywhere he wishes. Have you seen this movie yet? If not, grab some popcorn and relax. At the beginning of the movie, we are introduced to David, a below-average timid boy who lives in a small town. One day, he plucks up the courage to talk to his beautiful classmate Millie with the intent to be more than just classmates. He approaches her and gives her a snow globe as a gift. Millie gladly takes the snow globe that David gives her as a gift. David is teased when Mark, a different classmate, steps in and takes the gift away. David then tries to get the snow globe after his classmate tosses it right into the middle of an icy lake. Despite Millie telling him that it is too dangerous and to just leave the gift, David carefully treads on. After some time, David reaches the ball and smiles at Millie, but suddenly, the ice breaks and he falls under the icy lake. David is dragged further by the current and has little prospect of returning to the surface. Just then he finds himself in the library, cold, wet, and confused. David tries to leave the library without drawing attention to himself. David arrives home late and his father William sees this. David does not respond when William asks where he has been. When William becomes angry, he chases David into his room. William tries to push his way into David's locked room. His father is about to enter when David instantly teleports back to the library. David understands that his newly acquired skills might be the key to a happier life. With so many possibilities in this teleportation ability, he makes the decision to start over in a larger city. David then practices at a park to try to gain more control over his skills and discover more about it. He tries to teleport to various tourist destinations across the world that he sees while flipping through a travel magazine. When he sees the Empire State Building, he is reminded of his mother Barry being there. Suddenly, objects in his room begin to fly around, and he can teleport to the Empire State Building. It dawned on David then that he can only teleport to locations he has already visited. He then gets an idea to quickly become rich. He visits a bank and requests to use the restroom. On his way, he sees a view of the vault inside. David enters the vault that evening by teleporting there and snatches as much cash as possible. With each trip he returns from, he packs his backpack full of cash. Finally, he lay on his bed full of dollar bills. An investigation into the bank robbery starts the next day. Roland Cox arrives in and informs the bank manager that he is employed by the government. Then he demands to see every piece of camera security footage and the names of all the people who have been inside the bank in the previous month. Roland points out that the bank vault had never been unlocked and that the robbery's method of execution was unknown to the authorities. Roland suggests that a person who teleports may have been responsible for the robbery. A few years go by. David now resides in an expensive apartment in downtown New York. David has an extravagant life, having everything he needs and doing whatever pleases him. Pictures of various places across the world are all over his flat. And he even has a hidden area where he saves cash from different countries. When David arrives at a London bar, he teleports there and notices a stunning woman. He quickly teleports beside her, not thinking that a person named Griffin sees him. After spending the night with her, he leaves for Fiji the next day in order to surf some really big waves. After that, he travels to Egypt and eats lunch atop the Sphinx. Meanwhile, in another scene, a man is seen running away. He's also a teleporter and tries to use his abilities, but a cable attached to him prevents him from doing so. Roland then appears and approaches him. The man asks Roland why is he hunting him, and Roland responds that for no reason. All people like him must be eliminated. He then silences the man forever. Then, he gets a call about the bank robbery that happened a few years ago. Back to the present. David cheerfully enters his room when he sees the unfamiliar face of Roland. He asks him to leave, but Roland explains that he's investigating the case regarding a certain bank robbery. Then, he smacks David and electrocutes him. David immediately tries to teleport away, but he only gets a few meters. He tries running away, but Roland shoots a cable and binds him to the ground. This limits his teleportation abilities up to a few meters only. As David struggles in vain to get away, he manages to cut the line and teleport to a secret area in the wall. With the line cut off, he appears in his old room at his father's house. William immediately goes to David after hearing the noise in his room. He is shocked to see him again suddenly appearing out of thin air. He begs him to stay, but he just teleports again. When David goes looking for Millie the next day, he discovers that she works at a nearby bar. Then, he runs into Mark the bully from his previous school and they fight. After that, Mark is left in a bank vault by David, who teleported him there. He then gets back to Millie to have a talk. David asks Millie how she's doing in the little town and informs her that he works in banking now. When Millie confesses she still has dreams of traveling the world, David proposes taking her to Rome. After hearing this, Millie is overjoyed and informs David that she would really like to travel. Griffin is looking intently from behind them. A few hours later, David and Millie are visiting the Colosseum in Rome. In the meantime, Roland approaches Mark out of a police station by posing as an agent of the CIA. When he questions him about what transpired in the bank, Roland finds out about Millie and discovers that she has recently arrived in Rome. At a flat in Rome, David and Millie are talking about their lives and how they have grown over the past few years. Following their passionate kiss, David and Millie had a romantic moment. David brings Millie into the Colosseum later that day, and the two of them wander around while dodging guards. David eventually runs into Griffin after separating from Millie to unlock a bar door. Griffin says he can teleport too, calling himself and others who were able to do so jumpers. A gang of people known as paladins are out to kill all jumpers. Griffin warns David, calling him out on his rich and carefree lifestyle, that it will only attract the enemy. A couple of paladins appear as he is explaining. A fight breaks out as the paladins advancing use their batons. When David tries to flee, one of the electrical cords catches him. Once more, his teleportation power is negated. Griffin then engages in combat with the two paladins, swiftly subduing them. He tells David that he has been fighting paladins for a long time and disables both of his pursuers. After that, he teleports off to his hidden hideout. David follows after spotting what is known as a jump scare by Griffin. After receiving a warning from Griffin, David goes back to Millie. After that, Millie is taken by David and ushered outside the Colosseum, and she demands to know why this is happening. The police then come and capture David. David admits to breaking the law as a tourist and is apologetic when questioned at the police station. Afterward, the officers instructed David to await the U.S. Embassy magistrate. Just then, a woman she has not seen for so long comes to her. It's her mother, Mary. David receives a key to his handcuffs from Mary, who informs him he has just 30 seconds left before different paladins show up. David follows Mary as she quickly leaves again, but he loses sight of her. David breaks the news to Millie at the airport. They must part ways. This depresses Millie, but she still decides to fly alone. Roland reveals himself as an IRS agent when he gets to William's house. William is unfriendly and uncooperative when Roland inquires about David. "I have not seen David in 8 years," says William. He talks about how David turned 5 when Mary abandoned him and David. Roland declines William's request for him to go. When David gets to Griffin's hiding place, he finds that his walls are covered in images and facts about paladins all across the world. Griffin is asked by David to explain why paladins are killing jumpers. Griffin adds that the conflict dates back to the Dark Ages. Griffin claims that the paladins are fanatical religious people who think that only God should have the ability to teleport. Then he informs David that paladins will kill everyone to get to David, no questions asked. After teleporting to William, he finds him paralyzed on the floor. Medical staff come to William's aid as he moves them to a hospital. Returning to Griffin's hideout, David wants to learn more about Roland because he plans to defend himself and his loved ones. Griffin claims it's pointless because he's been pursuing Roland for over 10 years and keeps even more wounded. David offers to assist in apprehending Roland, but Griffin declines. After that, Griffin teleports to China, but David follows, attempting to persuade Griffin to accept his offer. Griffin eventually gives up when David informs him that, in relation to Millie, he knows where Roland might show up next. They choose to part ways with Griffin going back to the hiding place to gather his weapons while David goes to retrieve Millie. When David gets to Millie's apartment, she is surprised to see David again. Millie informs him that she no longer wants to do anything with him. David hears Roland and a few other men approaching, despite Millie's orders for him to go. David is forced to confess to Millie that he is a jumper. When Millie realizes that David has abilities, she is horrified and flees. They both teleport to Griffin's hiding place as David grabs her, sensing that danger is approaching. When Roland and the other paladins arrive at Millie's apartment, they discover it to be empty, but Roland discovers a jump scar. When they remove a device and place it beneath the jump scar, a portal begins to appear. In an attempt to follow David, they are trying to reopen the jump scar. Griffin and David meet, and Griffin is furious that Millie is there. David tells Griffin about the paladin's machine, and he warns him that taking Millie to the hideout will only make the paladins find them. When David and Griffin visit the jump car, they notice that it is growing bigger. Roland appears a few seconds later. While David and Griffin are hiding, he notices a photo of Mary among the recognized paladins on Griffin's wall. After that, an electrified cable is used to tag David, and he is pinned to the wall. Griffin enters with a flamethrower in his hand. The two then engage in combat, with Griffin using his teleportation skills to obtain the upper hand. Using the paladin's technology, Roland puts up a strong fight as well. After punching Roland out of the hiding place, Griffin teleports away, but he comes back carrying a running bus that is headed straight for Roland. Despite having little time to react, Roland avoids the approaching bus. As Millie attempts to release David, who is tied to a wall, Roland seems prepared to kill her. Millie remains motionless until Griffin reappears brandishing the flamethrower and throws Roland back into the jump scar. Griffin leaps to his aid. The fight carries on when Roland and Griffin return to Millie's apartment. After successfully freeing David back in the hideout, Millie informs him she wants to go home. David gives in since he has no other option. With the intention of bringing Millie back, Griffin makes a successful return with the technology of the paladins. However, the paladins are still able to throw a cable, capture Millie, and bring her back to the apartment while the jump scar is still active. Griffin gets ready to detonate a bomb, but David wants to save Millie. Griffin explains to David that this is his opportunity to finally put a stop to the paladins. He plans to use the explosives to transport himself to the apartment. David objects and uses the bomb to teleport away. Griffin pursues him, and the two end up teleporting through numerous locals while fighting. All the while fighting for the remote detonator of the bomb in San Francisco, Griffin eventually obtains the detonator. Griffin is unaware of the fact that a tall structure is falling onto them. Griffin is teleported inside the building by David, who then allows an enormous quantity of energy to grab him. He makes an attempt to get away, but the pylon is too sturdy to be broken through. Griffin makes an effort to talk David out of going back to the flat, claiming he can't compete with 5 paladins, but David is committed to saving Millie. When David arrives back to the apartment and sees Millie, the 5 electrified cables that the paladins had anchored to the apartment sting him right away. David tries keeping his attention on teleporting out of sight. The result is a tremendous shake of the entire residence. Since David is wired up in the flat, the apartment teleports with him. At last, he sends the entire apartment to the lake where he first discovered his abilities. After some of the paladins drown and most of them get disabled, David teleports the apartment back to the library. When David comes to, he discovers that Roland is still alive. After that, David grabs Roland and leaves him in the middle of the Grand Canyon. After some time, David finds his mother. When Mary's daughter opens the door, David and Mary are able to have a conversation. Mary reveals that she is a paladin as well. Mary had to make the tough choice to leave David after he teleported for the first time when he was 5 years old in order to keep him safe from the other paladins. David wonders what happens after this. Mary responds by saying she would give him an advantage. The movie ends as David, fully accepted by Millie, teleports away, ready to face all the challenges that they may encounter together. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this movie.